I'm going to ask both sides to turn around and look at that clock back there and tell me what time it is. Mr. Ashton?
9:25.
And Mr. Baez?
9:26 is usually we don't agree.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That shows that the two of you will never agree on anything and will never interpret anything the same way. Enough is enough.
Dr. Bach, let me ask you, after having read the reports and the photographs that you mentioned and having visited the scene, the area, some 7 weeks and 1 day later, can you tell me whether or not you have formed an opinion as to the shortest period of time that the remains of Kaylee Marie Anthony could have been at the scene in which they were found?
Yes, 2 weeks, approximately 2 weeks.
Were you aware that one of the bones from this skeleton was buried in 4 inches of muck?
No.
Or humus? If you had that piece of information, that by operation of time or operation of water movement, that one of the bones was buried 4 inches into what is described as muck, would that not tend to indicate that this skull had been there for a great deal longer than 2 weeks?
Or a dog buried it?
I'm sorry, a dog buried it.
They do, as do coyotes. I don't know if you have those here.
We can, theoretically, one cell is enough to get a DNA profile, not with standard conditions. So let's say between 50 and 100 cells are enough under standard conditions to obtain a DNA profile.
And you would agree with me, would you not, that duct tape placed upon the face of a human being who is then placed in a semi-swampy, occasionally underwater, hot environment in Florida, in an area that is an erstwhile trash dump, and sits there for 6 months as every bit of skin cell decomposes off the body, leaving it completely skeletonized? You would agree with me, would you not, that the likelihood of finding any intact DNA on that tape is extremely remote?
Well, of course, the conditions which you describe are very bad for DNA. This is not a condition where you would have your DNA in. But of course, depending on different circumstances, whether or not you lose all of it, as explained, we only need a smaller number of a small amount of cells in order to get a DNA profile. So the question then is, okay, would you lose all cell material? And that's possible, but it's also possible that still enough cells would be present to obtain a DNA profile, especially when using low copy number DNA.
Apparently, a citizen called the Orange County Sheriff's Office, left some information about an inmate who may have had contact with Ms. Anthony at a point in time when the inmate was in the Orange County Jail.
What was the name of the witness?
The name of the witness is April Whalen. Apparently, her child died in a swimming pool and was found by the child's grandfather, who immediately administered CPR and called 911. Ms. Whalen was in an adjacent cell to Ms. Anthony for a very brief period of time. Ms. Whalen indicates to law enforcement she did not talk to Casey Anthony. However, she doesn't remember if she talked to other inmates.
For the test of the 250 microliter air sample, we saw organic components very weakly in the sample. They were components that were comparable to the sorts of materials that you would find, for example, in gasoline.
Gasoline. Ordinary gasoline.
Yes. 3 compounds that we just talked about, the chloroform, tetrachloroethylene, and dimethyl disulfide were present, but they were they gave very low responses in the instrument, although we did not quantify the concentrations. And because there are other sources of them available in the environment, based solely on our data from our test, I could not conclusively determine that the presence of those compounds indicated that there had been human remains in the trunk of the car.
Your background is not in studying human decomposition, correct? Hasn't been your specialty.
That is correct.
When you worked with the trunk and you opened it slightly, did you detect an odor coming from the trunk?
Yes, there was an odor coming from the trunk.
But do you have any background in identifying that odor?
I do not.
Well, I started looking at chlorophyll, and I was concerned about my smallest Yorkie. We have 2 Yorkie puppies. And the smallest one was having some issues where she was extremely tired all the time. And both of the dogs would eat the bamboo leaves out in the back. So I started looking up sources from the backyard that could potentially cause her to be more sleepy than it would affect the larger dog. And I started looking up chlorophyll, and then that prompted me to look up chloroform. I told you during my deposition in 2009 that I made those searches.
You told me at your deposition that you searched for chlorophyll, correct?
Yes.
And you spelled chlorophyll for me. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall denying that you made any searches for how to make chloroform?
I didn't look up how to make chloroform. I looked up chloroform.
Did you input the words into the Google search engine, how to make chloroform?
I don't recall putting in how to make chloroform, but I did Google search chloroform.
Is this something that you're recalling now that you've changed your medication since July of 2009?
Again, it's not...
Yes?
No, I recalled that at the time, but you didn't ask me about... I answered your question specifically.
And all of this stuff about chlorophyll and chloroform, you had told the prosecutors about that back in 2009, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And this is nothing new.
No, it's not. Even at that point, she could climb into the pool by herself.
And for safety reasons, you would always just be there as a safety net.
Yes.
Could Kaylee open doors fairly easily at her age?
Yes, she could.
Would you agree that there is absolutely no way that Kaylee would have been able to open that gate?
Oh, there's no way she could open the gate to the from the backyard to the front yard. There's no way.
I was very angry at my mom, and I was also angry at my sister. I mean, I was just angry at everyone in general that they didn't want to include me, and didn't find it important enough to tell me, especially after I'd already asked. So I was very hurt, and I didn't want to. I don't think I wanted to believe it, you know.
What was different about the way, the emotion with which you answered that question 2 hours ago?
Mm-hmm.
It was different than the emotion that you did not display when asked the same question 2 years ago.
2 years ago, I did not 100% hold the belief that Kaylee was dead at this very moment, and 2 hours ago. And during that 2 year span, I've come to the place where I believe that she is. And my emotions are elicited from those facts that I have regrets, and I wish I could have been there a lot more than I was.